Proletarians of all countries unite. We are of the same blood, you and I. In the name of Perun, I greet you. What is Soviet power? Reisner, Mikhail, Andreevich. 1918. The first chapter, Soviet power and bourgeoisie power. After the working population, both rural and urban, took all the power in our republic into their own hands, they also took upon themselves a great responsibility. Now it is no longer possible to blame others for our disorder, ruin, and misery. The Tsar is to blame, or the officials, or some other authority. Now we ourselves control everything and are responsible for everything. But to govern the state correctly, one needs to understand its structure well. One needs to understand what our Soviet or Council order consists of, what its main law or constitution is, and how it differs from our other orders that supposedly also establish people's power and freedom. Especially now, it is necessary for everyone to think about all this, as many enemies of the Soviet workers and peasants' power are proposing some other, all people's power, deceptive freedom, and also, so to speak, a republic. They know perfectly well that we will never again accept a new Tsar, so they propose to us a constituent assembly with false freedom, equality, and fraternity. What to do all this deserters, who now go against the workers and peasants' power together with the Czechoslovaks, Japanese, Chinese, British, French, and Americans hope for? After all, their deception can be very easily exposed, just by looking at how they live, what kind of freedom and all people's power they have established for themselves. Indeed, at first glance, if you look at their main laws or constitution, it may seem that they really do not have the dominance of the rich and the kulaks, but simply a paradise on earth. Everything is described so wonderfully, beautifully, and smoothly. Judge for yourselves. Their republic is called not Soviet and socialist, but democratic. What can we say? Democracy is a good word. Republic means public matter, and democracy means the power of the people. Democratic republic means such a state where all power belongs to the people for the common good. At first glance, there seems to be no difference with our Soviet order. After all, we also have power, and it belongs to the people. It seems that we and they have the same thing, and there is no need to argue here. To this, one can respond with the saying, Fedot, but not the one. We have power, but not that one. We have people, but not the same. How do they understand power? To answer this question, one only needs to look into their books and laws and see how their democratic scholars explain this very power. According to their doctrine, it turns out that nothing can be above this power. It is eternal, omnipotent, ultimate, inalienable, and even infallible. This power is above all and can do everything. Everyone must obey it as an earthly idol, and no laws are written for it. Not power for man, but man for power, just as it was with the Jews, where man was for the Sabbath, not the Sabbath for man. It is not the same with us. We know perfectly well what state power rests on. It is always where one part of the population oppresses another, where a handful of the rich and lords crush the workers, where the power of the masters over the slave is supported by the power of the stick, the saber, or the gallows. We not only do not make an idol out of power and do not build temples for it, But we believe that we will achieve our goal only when there is no more division into classes of oppressors and oppressed. There will be no jailers and executioners, and only the power of nature, reason, and free conscience will remain. The question now arises: if we reject power, how do we now, in our workers' and peasants' republic, not only accept power, but also demand submission to it from not only our enemies, but also from our own? Here, one can even ask, in the words of the scripture, are the sons not free? To this we can answer only one thing: our power is not permanent, but temporary. This power is exclusively for the struggle against our enemies. We need it as long as two armies still stand against each other: labor and capital, the poor and the rich. We know well that power is not a sweet and joyful thing. There is no special joy in responding to violence with violence, to murder with murder. But we are forced to arm the power of workers and peasants, freed from yesterday's slavery, to crush the power of robbers and oppressors, who would otherwise again drive the working population into stinking underground pits. We do not love power, but as long as it's necessary, we openly declare in our fundamental law or constitution, all power belongs to all the working population of the country, united in urban and rural Soviets. Article 10. And we need it in the current transitional moment to achieve with its help the complete suppression of the bourgeoisie, the destruction of the exploitation of man by man, and the establishment of socialism, in which there will be no division into classes, nor state power. Article 9. Already in these words of law, one cannot fail to see the great difference between our constitution and the democratic one. We not only openly declare that we strive for the ultimate elimination of all state power, but we frankly admit that we took it to suppress the hostile class to us, the rich and the masters. Such a direct and honest declarations of who holds power cannot be found in their most democratic, most free republics. Nowhere do they tell the truth. Nowhere is it written that in their republics all power belongs to the bourgeoisie, usurers, profiteers, landlords, and all these bloodsuckers and parasites. And it is not surprising if the bourgeoisie were to say just as directly and honestly that in their democracies it is not the people who actually rule, but they, the people's parasites and spiders. The working people would not tolerate them for long, would quickly understand what is going on, and would remove all this power of oppressors from their backs. That is why in democratic laws it is never said directly who holds power, but only figuratively, with a twist and with deception. Supposedly, power belongs not to one class of the rich and powerful, but to the entire people. It is not us, they say, who rule over the working and oppressed, but they themselves rule together with us in the form of some common people, whose body is wrapped in the rags and whose head walks in silk. They tell it well, but who will believe these stories? And to paint a true picture of who is actually hiding behind this all people, it is enough to look at what freedoms and rights are actually granted to the people there and here. This is the end of first chapter. Thank you for your attention.